One of the first things you learn in a writing or storytelling class is the importance of character traits. After all, we need to give our characters traits to make them relatable to our audiences. There's a time and a place for a silent protagonist, of course, but most of the time we want heroes with visible strengths and weaknesses, something to hold on to, someone to root for, someone to look at and feel yourself being reflected back. Especially in stories about our heroes, we have an expectation for certain traits. Strength, determination, willpower, justice, not just cool action figure stuff, but traits that make us want to root for them because they're cool and because they saved the day. But recently, that message just honestly felt a little bleak. Along with everything else going on in this weird world we live in, dark, gritty, and edgy stories ruled our screens for a long time. Heroes had to be realistic in order to be taken seriously, and our heroes had to be broken because we were violent, broken people and we almost didn't deserve any better. But that story got old. The grit, the edginess, it all began to feel exhausting. People wanted something new to look towards, something different, radical, and strange, and maybe even something softer and kinder. People wanted to hope again, and I feel like we really didn't start getting it back, at least not in big blockbuster storytelling, until James Gunn's Superman. There's a lot to be said about Superman, but one of my favorite things has to be the audience's reaction to it. They saw a movie full of heart, full of hope, with a bit of a cheesy message, but they didn't recoil and cringe like they would have long ago. They saw the movie and took a whole new message out of it. Maybe being kind is the real punk rock. Those words are never actually uttered in the film, but it's become a cultural thesis of Superman. Being kind is punk rock. And this movie demonstrates it so well, it almost makes me want to go see the movie again. I've seen it twice in theaters, and I've watched it a third time while writing this video. I'm becoming a little obsessed. No, I've never been diagnosed with anything, but I do have a few suspicions. And yet, for all this talk I've seen about Superman, there's another film that also came out this year, one that tried to deliver a very similar message, and nobody's really talking about it anymore, or at least talking about it for the reasons I want to talk about it. It's just this little film called Snow White. I'm not sure you've heard of it. Okay, jokes aside here, I found it really fascinating how both Superman and Snow White came out in the same year and preached, or tried to preach, a very similar message, but due to their methods, one was honored and revered, while the other was denounced and hated. And because my brain loves a good comparison chart, in today's video, we are going to take a closer look about how these two films both tackle the idea that kindness and cool, and how one of them nails it and the other one kind of sucks at it. Cool intro sequence. Woo woo. This video is sponsored by me. If you're enjoying the vibe so far, please consider subscribing to my channel. I really don't love plugging myself, but I'd love to hit 500 subscribers before Halloween. It would just make me happy, no specific reason. Okay, on with the video. So I want to recognize that kindness is a pretty broad topic, and one that you can really dive deep into philosophically. I mean, what does it mean to be kind and good? Are you a good person if you only do good things to make yourself look cool? Is being too kind even a thing? It's hard to say. But for this video, I'm thinking of kindness as something more than just being nice, quote unquote. It is a conscious, active choice, deciding that someone matters and doing something to help them. And how a story frames a character's kindness says a lot about that character and the point the story is trying to put across. For the sake of my analysis, I'm going to look at kindness in a little bit of a metric system. Number one is agency. Is this kindness something the character chooses to do or something they're expecting to embody? Number two is cost. What is the risk of being kind? Does it require sacrifice or is it just a thing they do? And the third thing is impact. What does kindness do to the people around the character? Does it inspire action or is it all for show? These aren't going to be hard rules, of course. A kind character will look different in all other kinds of stories, but for the sake of this analysis again, I will be using these 3 points to look at both Superman and Snow White. So let's start with Superman. Clark Kent has a strong storied history as a character, and especially a kind hero, but unfortunately we don't have time to go into every iteration, so we're just focusing on the Superman version from 2025. From the very start, we can tell that Clark's kindness is one of his core character traits. Goodness maybe too. He believes from the message sent to him by his parents when he was sent away from Krypton that he was sent to Earth for a purpose to do good. Doing good is something he thinks his biological parents expect him to embody, and that's what he does. It helps that his adoptive parents, Martha and John Kent, raise him to be a good man too, a good human man. And for a while, it does feel like Clark is living as what he's expected to be, until Luther is able to translate the rest of the message from his parents that had been corrupted when Clark fell into Earth's orbit, and it's not at all what he thought. He wasn't expected to be a good hero, he was expected to rule over humans, become their monarch, their god, and have a harem. Which, I mean, okay, come on, look at him. You can't tell me that no one wanted in on that harem. This is most of his character arc throughout the film, dealing with the legacy his biological parents left him while trying to be the person he thought they wanted him to be, only to find out his parents were kinda gross. This is a very simple version, I know. But when we look at Clark's actual agency through the film, I think we can still argue that he did a lot of that out of his own free will. Yes, he's arguably the strongest metahuman on the planet. Yes, he could have done what his parents told him to do, but he didn't. He fought back against that perception. Every good deed he did willingly. At first, Clark's kindness feels like a role he's expected to play, but when he learns what his parents really wanted, it becomes something much braver. Something he chooses to be even when he doesn't have to. That shift from obligation to conviction is what makes his kindness powerful. And Clark's kind and good actions have a huge cost on the film. Not only does he face real danger just suiting up to be Superman, or deciding to be good and turn himself into the government, which in the end he just ends up in Luther's pocket dimension, his actions are what get the plot going along. Clark stopping the Baravian government's attempts to invade Jahanpur is the largest cost, I think, he has to face in the entire movie. I mean, it kicks the whole plot into action. Every domino Luther has carefully lined up falls until Clark can stop it. It translates a message from his parents. It turns Superman from a messiah to a pariah. And yet through that all, he still stays kind. He doesn't turn dark and edgy when the world turns against him, even though he could and would honestly have every right reason to crash out. He turns himself into the government when there's a warrant out on him. He willingly gives himself up, not just for the good of the people he cares about, but also to find Crypto. What makes Clark's kindness more than just sacrifice is what it does to the people around him. Let's focus on two specific instances. Clark is stuck in the pocket dimension. A metahuman known as Rex Mason, who can transform his body into any element, including ones that don't exist anymore, is imprisoned with him as actual kryptonite, while Rex's little son Joey has been kidnapped and held hostage. One wrong move and Joey would be killed. Clark says he can save Joey. Rex doesn't believe him, until, that is, Malik Ali is brought into the picture. Malik is nothing more than a normal Metropolis citizen. He runs a falafel stand with his father, and during Superman's fight with the Hammer of Baravia, he helps Superman stand up. That alone was enough for Lex Luthor to bring him in and brutally murder him in front of Superman and Rex. Malik's one small act of kindness changed lives. Unfortunately, it ended his in the process. It's one of the few deaths we actually see on screen, and that makes it hit even harder. I mean, it's a character we hardly knew. We see him in one scene helping Superman out of a hole. That's it. We get a bit of backstory, and we don't see Malik again until Luthor executes him in front of a weakened Superman and Rex. This finally spurs Rex to act. He looks at Superman and asks if he can really get Joey out of there. And using his powers, Rex creates a literal sun to help heal Superman to get them out. It's a long escape, and Rex can't carry Joey while he's flying, so he entrusts Clark to carry him out. And Clark holds onto Joey tightly. Even after freeing Crypto, even after being attacked by the Raptors, even in the anti-proton river, Joey is held out of the way, crying but safe. Even as they face a black hole, Joey is safe. Clark fulfills his promise to Rex and Joey when Mr. Terrific finally locates them in the pocket dimension and leads them out. Clark's kindness to Rex and Joey isn't about just getting them out so he can escape too. Clark does not do it for his own benefit, though he does escape and finds Crypto, but because it's all wrong. What Luthor is doing, keeping so many people locked up in this hellish pocket dimension, is wrong. Even once he escapes, and when he's dealing with kryptonite poisoning, he still wants to go back in there, because there are still so many people to free. Superman is an inspiring force in this film. As he's recovering at his parents' farm after barely escaping the pocket dimension, Baravia starts to invade Jahanpur. And in the crowd of Jahanpurians, I think that's the word for them, a few children bravely raise a flag with Superman's S insignia on it. They're calling for him to help. He wants to go, but then a dimensional rift that Luthor creates in Metropolis is calling for him too. So he does what any person would do. He calls for help. He calls for Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Rex to help the Giantpurians while he deals with Luther. Throughout the movie, both Green Lantern and Hawkgirl are shown to be casually indifferent to the plight of the Giantpurians. I mean, they can tell that the dictator of Baravia is clearly overstepping, but they don't feel like they should get involved with geopolitical conflicts, and like many people, they think Clark's involvement was a bad idea. But his kindness and his drive to fight and protect the people of Giantpur inspires them to answer that call for help. It's hard to watch Superman and not feel something shift inside you. Even the reviews that call the film bloated with detail tend to agree the message still shines through. Kindness isn't just a virtue, it's a necessity for goodness. And choosing to be kind, especially when no one expects it of you, says far more than simply performing kindness out of obligation. The film never treats kindness as a weakness, and I think that's my favorite thing. Luther might see it that way, sure, but at its core, Superman argues that kindness is something deeply, profoundly human. It's not a destiny or a power, and it's a choice, one we have to make again and again and again. And the film believes that waking up every day and choosing to be kind, to be good, to be human is one of the bravest choices we can make. I know some people are going to see the title of this section and immediately judge me. It's obvious from my title and my thumbnail that I'm going to hit Snow White with a lot more criticism than I am Superman. And using the word religion while critiquing something, that's a fast track to bad faith arguments in my comments section. I mean, just so you know, every time I get a hate comment, I screenshot it and send it to my best friend so we can laugh at you privately. But that being said, when I describe Snow White as framing kindness as a religion, I don't mean that as a blanket critique of religion myself. I was raised Catholic. I know a lot about the big guy upstairs. And there are religious stories that are beautiful, moving, and deeply compassionate. And it's not that religious symbolism can't work. Plenty of stories can and have used it brilliantly and beautifully. But when it makes the protagonist feel infallible or less human and more divine, it undercuts the way we write protagonists completely. Protagonists are meant to be a little bit messy and a little bit relatable to us. So when a protagonist like, I don't know, Snow White isn't really that messy, it just doesn't hit the same. I do feel like I was going full conspiracy theory after this rewatch of Snow White, and I mean, watching it again, this time with my analysis goggles on, I started catching a lot more than I thought I would, and I felt a little crazy. But before we get into that, let's take a second to ground ourselves in the kindness rubric and walk through how this version of Snow White thinks about kindness. I will actually give a bit of credit to Snow White here, the character, not the whole movie, for what she's dealing with. Like Cinderella and some other grim heroines, Snow White is a victim of abuse. Her agency at the start of the film is limited because of this. She's essentially locked in the castle, doing cleaning and chores in rags to hide her beauty, and overall, she's just not being treated right by the evil queen. She's small, she's passive, and she follows the rules set by the queen without openly rebelling. By the way, a small nitpick, the evil queen doesn't even get a real name here. She's just evil queen or the queen. I mean, the least this remake could have done is give her a proper name. That's beside the point. That passivity sadly reflects what we often see in abusive relationships. When someone is controlled and pushed down, it's just hard to break free. The evil queen is pretty much Snow White's abuser, and I'll give Snow White a little credit for becoming more active once Jonathan shows up, but only a little. Even after Jonathan enters the story, Snow White's agency remains limited by the plot. When she does act, it's often reactive for most of the story. She goes out with a huntsman to pick apples and then runs when he tells her to avoid the queen. When the woodland animals lead her to the dwarves' home, she follows. She's rarely driving the story herself. There are a few moments of agency, of course. Snow White freeing Jonathan from the castle gate, helping the dwarves clean, assisting Jonathan and his merry band of thieves, and fighting back against the castle guards hunting her. But those moments seem very small in comparison to the rest of the film. Even as she begins embracing the mantra of fearless, fair, brave, and true, the words engraved on the locket her father gave her before going to war, she doesn't feel like a really active force in her own story. Her kindness feels like a reflection of that early virtue set by her parents in the first 10 minutes of the film, which is honestly a strange mirror to Clark's agency in Superman. There are clear costs to Snow White's kindness in the film. Most of her near-death moments happen because she chooses to be kind or compassionate. The evil queen is watching when the Snow White frees Jonathan from the gate, and when the magic mirror tells the queen that Snow White is now fairer than her because of her goodness, the immediate consequence is that Snow White is sent off on a suspicious apple-picking trip with the huntsman, only to end up with a dagger to her throat. hero. And the only reason she survives is because the huntsman, also nameless by the way, has just enough mercy in him to not kill a child. That mercy doesn't come from Snow White's actions, her agency, or kindness. It's external. It's about him, not her. Another consequence comes when Jonathan takes an arrow meant for her. After the two of them fight off the castle guards in the woods, he notices one last crossbow aimed straight at Snow, and he throws himself in front of it. He's badly injured, and Snow, along with the merry band of thieves, rushes him to the dwarves, hoping Doc can help. Of course, Jonathan survives. This is a kids' movie, after all, and everyone ends up dancing and having a grand old time by the fire. And when Snow White is tricked by the evil queen in disguise, with her kindness again, she's poisoned and sent into an apple-induced coma. But then she's revived almost instantly with true love's kiss. It's not that her kindness doesn't cost her, it does, but every consequence is patched up so quickly that it barely has any time to land. It erases any real sense of sacrifice or danger. There's that old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. But in this film, it feels like every punishment is walked back almost immediately. The narrative is in such a hurry to reassure us that Snow White is fine, that the stakes never really get the weight that they need. And in comparison to Superman's sacrifices, which carry emotional weight and long-term consequences for both him and the people around him, Snow White's consequences feel more like narrative speed bumps, brief detours on a way to a happily ever after. Snow White's kindness works in this film through mostly peaceful resistance and soft-spoken appeals. Spoken. And to be fair, there is a time and place for that. Not every conflict needs to be solved with a sword. Sometimes a stronger weapon, especially when you've been hurt, is simply holding on to your own voice. Kindness, when everything else feels cruel, can be a form of rebellion. But the impact her kindness leaves on the world around her feels strangely shallow. Yes, people change, but again, it happens too quickly and too neatly. Take Jonathan, for example. He starts out as a thief, leading a troupe of failed actors. But through Snow White's kindness and eventually love, he's reformed into this brave, good-hearted hero. Grumpy the dwarf, too, softens over time, his caution melting into respect as Snow White persists. These arcs are sweet in theory, but they never feel truly earned. The film makes people grow because the plot says they have to. It's like watching someone play with dolls. One character smiles, another character has a sudden breakthrough, and everyone hugs by the end. And this is where things start to feel off. Snow White doesn't just influence others, she purifies them. She reforms Jonathan, she tames Grumpy, and she passively outlasts the evil queen, who self-destructs under her own jealousy while Snow White just kind of watches. So there's something oddly sacred about the way this film frames Snow White's kindness. She doesn't really grow or change over the course of the story. You could argue she finds the courage to finally stand up to the evil queen by the end, but I'd hardly call that a character arc. Snow's goodness isn't the result of hard choices or inner conflict. She's just good. She's not so much a protagonist as she is a parable, a symbol. She just moves the plot forward, and her kindness doesn't evolve. It's not something she develops or struggles to hold on to. Instead, it's framed as something effortless and innate, and I would argue even a little divine. It's like the film doesn't want her to feel real. Her kindness isn't messy or complicated or hard-won. It's virtuous in a way that feels strangely moralizing. She's this icon of pure, unquestionable goodness. And that's where things start to feel off, because when kindness is portrayed as something that comes naturally to the right kind of person, as something you're born with, it stops being a choice, it stops having that power, and it starts sounding more like a sermon. I think that's where Snow White fails and where Superman succeeds. Where Superman treats kindness like a fight showing up for, Snow White treats it something like you're meant to inherit. Okay, fine, we'll talk about it now because I'm not going to be able to shut up about this. Superman's kindness is radical and disruptive. It puts him at odds with the US government, his own allies, and even the planet he's trying to protect. It's an active, dangerous choice, one that he makes repeatedly because it's the right thing to do. Snow White's kindness, on the other hand, feels bestowed upon her, like a divine right. She's born a princess, of course she's good. Where Superman earns a moral authority through choices, Snow White's moral authority comes prepackaged with her crown. She's like the chosen one, the prophet, oh my god, Snow White is Jesus Christ. And this is where I proceed to lose my mind. Snow White's kindness isn't just good, it's framed as something holy. She's the princess and she wants to bring her people back to the good old days where her parents were still alive. She's chosen by her birthright. She is the rightful ruler, the one true beacon of good in this land. She's hunted by a jealous, false ruler who fears her goodness, and she dies after being betrayed by someone close to her, and then she comes back from the dead, unites her kingdom, and everyone celebrates her return, and they're all wearing white in the end. Snow White is meant to be a Jesus Christ figure. And there's the wildest part. People have been calling Superman a Jesus figure for decades, which makes no sense to me because he's very clearly, if based on any biblical text, a Moses figure, a baby sent away from a doomed homeland, adopted by strangers, and grows up to save people. Superman is Moses, but Snow White is Jesus. If I wanted to go further, I could say that Snow White's depiction as a Jesus figure definitely says something about how Disney has been leaning towards a more truly conservative audience in the last decade, or whatever, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is kindness and how each movie frames it, and I hope through my analysis I've explained how Superman does it perfectly and how Snow White is kind of weird and religious about it. Man, I got really heated in the last section. Superman's theme of radical kindness feels especially poignant right now, almost necessary for the world we're living in, especially as America and other Western countries are steadily shifting towards a almost techno-fascist right. This movie is an unapologetic middle finger to the grimdark superheroes that have dominated for so long, especially from DC Studios. And of course, don't get me wrong, Superman isn't a perfect film. No piece of art is ever truly perfect, but I feel like it's something we really need right now. It shines a bright light on hope, resilience, and choosing kindness even when it's hard, even when things get difficult. It reminds us that no matter how dark the world feels, kindness is a conscious act, and it's essential if we want to see hope again. In contrast, Snow White presents kindness as more a fixed moral steps. It's a virtue you're either born with or born without, rather than something you actively decide to practice. In classic psychological terms, these two films embody a nature versus nurture debate, with Snow White firmly in the nature camp. Sure, I guess I can give it to them that some people can naturally be kinder than others, but portraying moral goodness as something inherited, almost genetic, and passed down by birthright and purity does reflect a bit of a culturally conservative perspective. It's less about breaking away from rules and more about following those rules and returning to tradition, rather than challenging injustices in the world and trying to imagine a better future. It makes kindness feel less like a choice and more a duty tied to who you are. Granted, both movies do have very different audiences. Superman is a superhero blockbuster, Snow White is a princess movie, and a live-action remake of an animated classic, and I've already talked about my feelings on that multiple times. But it's important to recognize how Snow White is less about disrupting the world and more about reinforcing the traditional ideas of order, where morally wrong characters like the evil queen are greedy, selfish, vain, and doomed to self-destruct. The message isn't that goodness is an act of choice. Instead, if you're good, you need to just return to the good old days, and everything will work out with a happily ever after. Framing kindness as something you're simply born with isn't radical or hopeful, it's honestly just kind of lazy. I don't expect much from the live-action Disney remakes anymore, but seeing Snow White twice for this analysis really did something to me, and I'm not sure I'll ever financially recover. To put it simply, Superman asks us to choose kindness even when it's dangerous and hard. Snow White tells us kindness is something good people are born with, and if you don't have it, as long as you're not as morally corrupt as the evil queen, kind of just have to wait for your savior to rescue you and bring you a better life. These stories are more than just fairy tales or superhero adventures. They are mirrors showing us how kindness lives in the world through different perspectives. And while Snow White's portrayal of kindness is kind of weird in my opinion, I still think the fact that these two movies came out in the same year with a similar thesis is kind of a fascinating thing to talk about, at the very least. We can take a lot from these two movies, but maybe we should take a little bit more from Superman. Maybe kindness really is punk. I know that last two sentences there didn't really make much sense together, but I wanted to end on that note. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I'm sorry for the lull in uploads. A lot has happened. I got a new mic. Hopefully the quality sounds at least a little bit better. I've been working on trying to deal with the clicking noise from my mouth. You know, it's a work in progress. Everything is just a constant work in progress. I hope y'all like this video. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below, and I will talk to you in the next one. Take care, and as always, keep your heads in the clouds. Take Jonathan, for example. He starts as a